Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Molly. I'm a knitter based out of the San Francisco Bay Area where I live with my husband and our cat Lola. And on this channel, I like to talk about all things knitting and fiber arts. So if that sounds like something you're into, I hope you'll stick around. In my last video, I talked a lot about the yarn that I have in my stash. I did a lot of organizing and I decided to destash quite a bit of yarn, as well as a variety of yarns that I picked out to knit up into donation items that will go to a yarn store near me, which will then distribute it to a charity in the area. I thought I might give you an update on how that's going at the end of my video. First, I wanted to give you a little bit of an idea, though, of what I've been working on during my YouTube hiatus. There's kind of been a lot of things that have been on and off my needles. I did frog a few projects and started re-knitting other things. There were some times where my knitting mojo was a little bit lower than others, and kind of a lot of stuff's been going on, so I don't think a full podcast episode where I sit down and tell you everything I knit in like 7 months is going to make a lot of sense. So I figured that today we might talk about a few finished objects, as well as one acquisition I got recently, and then do a little stash down donation knitting update. So I hope that sounds good to you. Let's go ahead and jump in with the things that I finished. So my first finished object is the Mara Tank by Brianna Mason of Woolbird, I believe, is the name of their Instagram and maybe their Ravelry store. This is knit in We Are Knitters cotton. So I had this cotton I bought from a kit back in maybe 2019, around the time that I got back into knitting. I think the pattern I got was called like maybe the Blanca Julep, and it was 2 flat knit rectangles basically that you then seam together, and you might knit sleeves. It had like a fun lace v-neck pattern in the front. I did start the pattern that came with the kit a couple times, but there were things wrong with it or something. Just basically I was making mistakes, or I left it on my needles once, I think, for quite a while. So over the course of these long breaks or mistakes and froggings, I basically kind of, I don't want to say outgrew the pattern, but my taste changed, and that sort of knitting something in that construction and that pattern itself were not really appealing to me anymore. So it took me a while to figure out in the end kind of what to do with this yarn. And during the summer, I did have this weird hankering to work with cotton yarn, which felt really important to take advantage of because I basically never feel that way. Cotton yarn is like not really my thing most of the time, but I do buy a lot of like cotton and other plant-based yarns more often than I should probably, because I like the colors, or I think it would be great to have a piece in that. And I do think that the finished objects are nice, but the actual knitting of it can be quite unpleasant, I find. It can kind of hurt my hands. I think that it's hard. There's just it's less forgiving to knit in a cotton yarn. So I just don't find it as fun. And I also struggle with blocking cotton. So this, I'm not gonna lie, has a little bit of a musty smell to it. So I don't have a washing machine in my unit, which I think I'll actually talk about a little bit later when it comes to my donation knits, but I don't really have an easy way to wash things that I kind of want to wash alone, or dry things. And I think that's where cotton can be very frustrating, because it takes forever to dry if you aren't drying it in a machine, or probably at the very least spinning out a lot of the water in a spin cycle. So this has a little bit of that like musty smell to it from like sitting out wet for a while, just because it was laid out to dry for blocking. I haven't worn it because of that very much. I have tried it on a couple times and it does look pretty good. I think it turned out really well, but I'm reminded every time I work with cotton why I don't work with cotton more often. In any case, this pattern is made for 2 strands of fingering weight held together, and the gauge is 21 stitches and 30 rows over 4 inches in 1x2 broken rib. So this is has a broken rib texture to it that I found pretty fun to knit, and I think it looks really nice. I do like a broken rib. This comes in 9 sizes and is designed to have 2 or 3 inches of negative ease, and it goes up to, I'm not sure if it goes up to fit a 60-inch bust or if the last size is 60 inches. Oh, hi Lola. Oh, the tail's making a little appearance. I made, I believe, the 3rd size, which is 35.5 inches. Sorry, Lola's tail is waving around. I know you can at least see the shadow of it. I have about a 38 to 39 inch bust, so that's slightly more negative ease than the pattern calls for, but I thought that perhaps my finished object would stretch out a little bit more. My gauge might be a little bit looser. I ended up using 255 grams of yarn for this, so I do have about 40 to 50 grams of yarn left over from the We Are Knitters cotton. This colorway is called Terracotta, I think, by the way, and I do really like this color. And I'm happy that I was able to find something to do with this yarn that I think I will get use out of, although maybe not until next summer. We'll see. The next thing I made is the mini mock neck tank. That's a pattern by Jessie May. And I made it in Little Fox Yarns Willow in the colorway Vardo. Oh, that's backwards. You get the idea though. This is a sport weight yarn, which is 70% merino and 38% hemp, and 328 yards per 100 grams. And I bought this at Brooklyn General Store in April when I went to visit my friend to celebrate her wedding with a party, which I mentioned briefly in my last video. So the pattern is written for fingering weight yarn, and the gauge is 24 stitches and 28 rows, is 4 inches. But I think I found that I was getting gauge or something close to it with this yarn, and I liked it, so I decided to go with it. I do find that sometimes my fingering weight gauge can be a little bit tighter than that, so this is just what I ended up going for. I made, I think, the 2nd size, although I have very poor notes on this one, and I didn't even make a Ravelry project page for this yet. And I used 173 grams of this yarn. This pattern is written to have 4.5 to 5.5 inches of negative ease with true measurements of 28 to 55.5 inches as a finished object. So those correspond to sizes extra small through 5X. The pattern doesn't have edging along the armholes added later. It just has you do a bit of ribbing along here, which is okay, but different. I don't think I've knit a sweater where if it didn't have arm edging, where I didn't add it myself in a long time. So to kind of have the finished object look a little more cohesive rather than just, so what you do as the pattern's written is do the few stitches of ribbing along the edges, and then you do a little bit of ribbing down here, and then you switch to stockinette. But I decided that I would carry the ribbing down the whole length of each of the sides. Basically, you cast on for the underarm, and I knit all of those stitches in ribbing, as well as keeping the stitches along the edge of the neckline. Those ones, as they continued into the body, I also knit in ribbing, and then the ribbing just continues into the bottom ribbing as well. I do think that worked really well. I'm quite happy with it. I think it fits very well. I guess mini mock neck is probably, I don't know if it's supposed to reference the amount of mock neck it is, but it's quite a small mock neck, but that's okay. with me. I do like the fit. I'm happy with it. And I think that this is something that I would definitely consider knitting again. I think the benefit of something like this is that it could be a good base layer under other sort of blazers, sweaters, jackets, and that's something that I think is definitely pretty nice. The next thing I knit is actually self-drafted. This is a raglan that I sort of designed myself and knit up without any sort of pattern. And I made this out of 2 yarns. The main color is a yarn from Craftivist in Atlanta. It is a Knitter's Homestead DK, which is a 75% merino, 25% nylon, and 245 yards per 100 grams. And the colorway I got was called Wildflowers. And then the contrast color I have along the edging is a KC Knits one-of-a-kind mini skein that I got at Black Squirrel. That is it's a 4-ply fingering weight, and I held it double for all the edging. Now, you can probably tell I haven't blocked this one or sewed in the ends yet. The process for this started with me buying this yarn at the Craftivist. I really liked the color. I thought it was so pretty and pretty unique. I don't typically go for DK yarns, especially when I am shopping out and about on travels, because it can be harder to like justify the space in my suitcase that I need to bring at home. But I just really liked this color. I really wanted a local yarn, and I believe that the dyer is in Atlanta or somewhere in Georgia, and I decided I would just spring for it. With that in mind, and having this yarn, I couldn't really find a pattern that I liked that much that I thought would suit the yarn. There's some like cable tees and other things that I liked, but I was thinking that the like speckling of this yarn would compete with that. Sort of any sort of texture on the shirt, or too much texture. Something like cables definitely being too much in my opinion for this. I also wasn't really in the mood for another DK tank or another knit tank because I just knit these 2. So I decided to try to self-draft my own t-shirt with a V-neck, because then I would be saving the yarn that it would take to make the neck by having the neck lower. And I did sort of use a couple of other patterns. I think I might have used the Flax by Tin Can Knits and the Trescow by Along avec Anna to kind of double check the numbers of things like the short rows in the back. Did I do short rows? I guess I didn't do short rows as such because I was just knitting back and forth. But, you know, to check things like the stitch counts of the arms and the back and the neckline and that kind of stuff. The finished circumference. So it ended up working really well. But as I was knitting, I decided that it might be good to use a mini for the border because I wasn't sure that this color like ultimately would look that great with my skin. I'm not the type of person who cares that much about like color in terms of what I wear. I don't have a palette I try to stick to. I don't really know my colors in terms of like seasons, you know, any of the stuff that people do to decide what colors look best on them, I don't really do. I just kind of pick colors I like, and they do sort of tend to follow often a palette that matches up okay, but I just kind of do what I think looks nice in the skein or in a finished object. I just knit what I think is a pretty color, and then I kind of figure it out later. But I was worried this would look, I mean, it's pinker. I feel like it looks pinker maybe than it comes across in person. I just was worried I would maybe look a little naked if I wore this out. I mean, obviously it has the blue spot. I don't know. I thought it might be nice in terms of actual wearability and how it would look on me to have contrast borders, which is where I decided to do these Casey Knits. I decided to use this Casey Knits mini that I had sitting in my stash. I kind of looked at a bunch of the DK yarn, a lot of it which ended up in here, and a variety of other yarns, and this is the one that I landed on looking the best. And I do think it looks pretty good. I believe I did a 3-stitch I-cord at the neckline and the bottom. You can't even see the bottom I-cord because it's rolling quite a bit. And then I believe I did 2 stitches at the arms to keep them kind of small. And I don't actually know if this will fully block out. I thought about blocking it this week, but I was worried it wouldn't be dry by the time I wanted to film, so I figured I would just film first and block later. So this will probably go down on my blocking mats tonight. The whole thing is 289 grams, so I was able to achieve knitting a t-shirt to the length I liked with the amount of yarn that I had, and I even had a little left over. So overall, I would say that it's a success, pending if something happens that's really crazy when I block it. In terms of projects that I have that are currently in progress for myself, I do have a couple, but I think those are best saved for another video. It's actually been probably almost a month since I've worked on a lot of them because I have been focusing on my donation knits. So we can talk a little bit more about what I've been working on next time or some other time. Now, I have one acquisition from the Black Squirrel anniversary sale. Black Squirrel is a yarn store in Berkeley. It is one of my most local yarn stores. I really love it. It's such a beautiful store. They have an incredible selection of hand-dyed yarn and a lot of really good commercial yarns. Great. They cover a lot of price points. Honestly, like, I feel like they're one of the best one-stop shops in the Bay Area for like almost any kind of yarn you could look for. Now, I have not been spinning very much, but they have this beautiful John Arbin Textiles top in a bunch of different colors and a few different varieties, actually, a few different fiber types. They're new. They were like something that they started stocking just before the anniversary sale, so it was really hard for me not to pick it up, and I did. So this is John Arbin Textiles Appledore fiber. It's in the colorway Slack McGirdle, and it is 40% Devon Closewell, 40% Romney, and 20% Exmoor Blueface. So it's a blend that I don't think I have in my stash. I don't see too much of, and I thought that the colors were fun. And what made it a little more fun is that they actually have this fiber spun up. So I was able to see what this colorway will look like spun up. Although I do know that hand spinning, and especially my hand spinning, which is not great, will look very different than the skein. But, you know, just to see how the colors kind of blend and what they end up looking like, that was pretty interesting. And if I do spin this at something approximating a DK weight and I want to add a little more yarn, I can buy some John Arbin Textiles yarn from Black Squirrel that will be the same fiber. Probably I would buy a different colorway, to like a contrasting colorway. But either way, it's very cool that I was able to kind of see what this was like spun up. And given the sale, this was not too bad of a purchase. I just need to get back into spinning, which I also think would be good because it would give me sort of a different thing to do with my hands and give the knitting muscles a little bit of a break while I spin. Although there are some that are the same. I think doing a different motion sometimes might do me a little bit of good. The last thing I got from Black Squirrel was these stitch stoppers. They're very festive for the season. These were wrapped up as one of the door prizes. So just a fun little freebie that Black Squirrel does for their anniversary sale every year. And yeah, I think they're really cute. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the donation knitting and the destashing process. Between my last video and now, I have sold a lot of the yarn that I said I was going to try to sell, which is great. The way someone did ask, and the way that I find personally the best to sell yarn is on the Yarn Swap subreddit. So it's reddit.com/r/yarn swap, and there might be requirements of how long you need to have had an account and stuff, but I find that that's a better place to sell yarn than Facebook, where in my experience a lot of people are just looking for like enormous red heart like hauls from people. It might just be the groups or the marketplaces that I've been on Facebook. I'm not super experienced selling on Facebook, but Yarn Swap has worked out pretty well for me. And if you're someone who kind of knows Reddit, it would definitely be my recommendation. So I sold all of the Knit Picks yarn that I said I was going to. I sold all the wool of the Andes, and I also sold my Bear Swish and my Bear Capretta Superwash, which were 2 quantities of yarn that I was kind of reluctantly holding on to. The Swish I was considering making hats out of for the donations, but in part I just didn't really want to like ball it up because it came in like long, not even really like hanks. They were just kind of like a D-twisted hank. I feel like there's a better way to describe it, but I just didn't really want to ball it up, and I had other yarns that were already an easier put up to use for stashing down for the donation. So I decided to sell the Bear Swish. I decided to sell the Bear Capretta Superwash, which I was thinking I might save just to have a bear yarn around, but I have a good amount of bear yarns, bear fingering weight, sock weight yarns kind of around. So I sold both of those as well. And I also sold one little gradient hand-dyed yarn that I mentioned trying to sell as well. All of that added up to 1,800 grams by like commercial, what they had been told to me as. I didn't weigh them as I sold them. I just sold all of these skeins, and it was 1,800 grams worth. So I'm quite happy with that. I haven't given away any of the yarn that I said I would give away yet, in part because I might try to give away some of the yarns that I don't finish making things with for my donations. But either way, I'm pretty happy with that. It did clear up a good amount of space, and it's a good start for sure. Now, on to the donations. I have made quite a good bit of headway. If you remember me talking about the yarn I wanted to use, I have used all the Swish, I've used all the King Cole Merino Blend DK, I've used the Universal Yarns Fin, the Barocco Vintage, and a good amount of the Paint Box wool, which I'm mostly going to be using for mitts. But stupidly, I left that at work. I left my most recent mitt project at work on Tuesday because I bring it in to knit on the train, but I took it out and it was like hidden behind my laptop as I packed up to go, and I packed up in kind of a hurry. So I left it sitting on my desk, and I only go in once a week, so I'll be picking that up next Tuesday. So that it would be my 4th pair of mitts, I believe. Basically, I've had that paint box yarn sitting around. I don't like it. I'm not enjoying knitting with it. I was kind of enjoying the like feeling of powering through it, but it did end up being that I took a break when I left that mitt at work, which has been nice because I've gotten back to knitting some other hats with other types of yarn that I have been wanting to use as well. I have 12 hats total. So the Barocco Vintage hats are these 3 and a little bit of this one, which also the top part is the paint box. It's not as soft, but I figured this would be the part that was kind of around your ears, and this is the vintage, so I figured it would be okay. So that's 4 hats. This is a Knit Picks bulky Wool of the Andes Superwash 5 hats. The Swish and King Cole hats are all here. This is 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I have the Universal Yarns Fin here, 11, 12, or 10, 11. And then this is Universal Yarns Donina with a little bit of the fin just as like a contrast stripe to use the rest of it up. So 12 hats so far. And the 3 pairs of mitts out of the paint box that I finished are here. And I'll link the patterns and the drive that I'm knitting for so that you can join in, and if you're interested in any of the patterns, you can have them. I've mostly been working off of free like vanilla hat patterns for worsted and DK yarn, with this one being a slightly more interesting yarn or pattern for, I believe, this is kind of like a borderline Aran bulky weight yarn, and I think the pattern might be Aran. My next hat should finish all of the remaining Donina from Universal Yarns, but I've just gotten this far, and this is what I have. I'm knitting it held double, so anything that isn't a DK weight yarn, at least I'm holding double. That total means I've made 3 pairs of mitts and 12 hats. I've used almost 750 grams of yarn, and I still have about 2 weeks left, although that 2 weeks includes the time to do all the finishing on these items, which is a little bit of a sticking point because, like I said, I don't have a washing machine in unit. I would like to wash and block these in some manner, and I'm thinking because these are all machine washable, I am pretty sure that I'll skip non-superwash wool for this, in part just because I have so much other superwash wool and maybe even acrylics. I haven't broken into the pure acrylic yet, that I just think it's probably better to use that first before I even decide what to do with this non-superwash wool. So all of these should be machine washable, and I think that ideally the recipients would be able to machine wash them if they wanted. So I'm thinking I might just chuck them at least in the washing machine, if not the dryer, after I weave in all the ends. I would not do it before weaving in the ends. I don't want to create a yarn end rad king in the washing machine. So that's my thought. If you are someone who typically does like super wash things in the machine, you know, I would do cold, I would do delicate cycle, but if you have any tips, especially if they're tips for like I don't have a special, it's not like there's no hand wash setting, there's no special thing going on with this machine. I don't think I can do like an extra long spin or rinse or whatever. Those aren't like options to me. But if you have any tips, let me know. I think that might be my best bet. And even then, if I have to lay them out, they will be not as wet because they will have been spun in the spin cycle. And hopefully then I won't have to lay them out for as long. Basically, I just like to cycle these through blocking manually, I think might drive me a little crazy. So being able to just throw them all in a machine and then find places to like stick them around overnight to dry is probably what I'm most interested in. But if you think that's a really bad idea, let me know. Overall, that's I think about 2,500 grams of yarn that are either sold and just gone or will be gone when I end up donating all of these items. I do expect to be able to use probably another 300 grams or something because there's a good amount of time left. So yeah, I'm really happy with my progress. I feel great about all of these hats. I've had a lot of fun kind of experimenting with some of the color blocking. Like, are they all super beautiful? Like, no, but I do think that it's been fun to kind of try out different color schemes and just roll with the yarn that I have and kind of see how it turns out while having it feel a little bit low pressure in terms of exactly how it looks. So that's all I have to talk to you about today. I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. As I said, if you are a machine washing of your superwash wool person, let me know. Give me tips. If you are interested in any of these patterns, make sure to look below in the notes. I will have info about them, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of the individual yarns, patterns, etc. that I use to make these donation items. By and large, a lot of these yarns are discontinued. Oh, maybe not all of them, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about these items. As always, I'd love to hear what it is that you have been working on, any of your recent knits. what you've been up to fiber crafting wise. Love to have a chat. So leave a comment below if there's anything you just want to chat about. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.